A representative from Capcom said players aren't looking to see these exact characters, talking about Magneto. They want other characters that function in the same way, that play in the same style, and as long as they can have functions of those characters that they've fallen in love with, they'll be okay. And the response to that was, no, we want Magneto. We want Storm, we want Wolverine, and it is not Marvel vs. Capcom unless it is those characters. It is not the movements they make, it is not their hitboxes, it is that character, those characters, that identity that we are after. That shows you that this is more than a game. This is a culture, and that was a non-negotiable. The game is truly on its way to becoming the next version of MVC3, completely developed by the community. The art has been taken from Capcom in a certain sense and taken forward. And you know, we're doing something a little new today, but I bet you before I introduce that, you're going to want to say,
I don't know what
click
to say
the
here.
like button.
Oh, yeah. If you guys don't mind hitting the like button, it actually helps out the channel just a ton. Psycho Crush the like button. There it is.
Yeah, actually, it's looking at the analytics. I always feel like, okay, everybody says those things, but they also seem to, they work. Apparently they work. People won't click unless you say that. So please subscribe, click, comment, all those things that I feel like I shouldn't. Anyways, this week I am not talking about Street Fighter. John will be talking about Street Fighter, absolutely. But I am not talking directly about Street Fighter. I'm going to talk about Marvel vs. Capcom, which I am no expert in, but something is going on in Marvel vs. Capcomville right now that I think is really important, very interesting. I don't know what all the takeaways should be at this point. I don't presume to know, but I think it's just worth sort of talking about and looking at and appreciating. And so before I get into all that, I want to say that in high school, I had a creative writing class, and the teacher, Mr. Scrivener, shout outs to Scribs. He actually might be watching this. He was a huge nerd. We talked Resident Evil. But Mr. Scrivener, I remember one day him telling us that once you as an artist send your art out into the public, out into the society, out into the world, it is no longer yours. And maybe it's better put, no longer fully yours. And of course, that doesn't mean your name isn't signed to the bottom, that you don't have copyright, ownership of it, that you can't, depending on what the art is, take it and maybe continue to change it, add to it, evolve it, whatever. But what it means is that once it goes out there, other people, unless they're completely apathetic to it, other people are going to develop a relationship with it, and they are going to develop, like, it's going to mean something specific to them. It's going to entertain them. It's going to shine light on something about themselves. They're going to develop a relationship with it on the individual level and also on the societal or community level, especially in the case of Marvel versus Capcom. And art can be a lot of different things. It could be a piece of music. It could be a creative writing. It could be
Chun-Li's
stand-up.
face.
It could be Chun-Li's face. It could be a video game franchise that you develop. And so this idea that it goes out there and it's no longer yours, because the artist has control of virtually every component of it while they're creating it. But once they send it out there, the relationships that develop with this art, the artist is not in control over. And it becomes truly the other, every single individual that interacts with it and is impressed by it in some way changes its meaning, changes its definition, changes what it is. And the artist really doesn't have much say over that once it's out there. So that concept, which was very difficult for a lot of creative writing high school students to comprehend and be okay with, that concept seems to be, in at least certain ways, literally applied to Marvel vs. Capcom right now, as the community has evolved and into a culture that has, in a sense, reclaimed Marvel vs. Capcom. And it's different, it's beautiful, it's intriguing, it's weird, but like I said, I'd want to look at it. So that's the sort of gist of all of this. But before I go any further, John, did you have any reactions to any of that? Or do you think it's totally stupid and not even legit?
No. A lot of artists say, like, what was it? The Fray, they had the song How to Save a Life, and that was about a very specific moment in that guy's life where he was, dealing with someone, but they really opened it up, the meaning of the song, because they're like, we want it to be representative of anyone who listens to it and enjoys it, we want them to feel how they feel with it. And that's really good work from the artist when they do that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So what's happening specifically now? I almost want to go back a little bit over the history of Marvel versus Capcom, because there are some really important components of that story that feed into the current situation. So I'll do that as quickly as possible. For those of you that need a quick refresher, Marvel, everybody knows what Marvel is now, was not as popular back in the 90s. And they actually ended up selling some of their characters, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, to Fox. And a lot of us watch those daily or those Saturday morning cartoons with Spider-Man and the X-Men and such. All right. Well, and then during this time too, Marvel or Capcom develops the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise and makes some fighting games with the Capcom characters of their choosing and a handful of Marvel characters. All right, it's all good. And this franchise really takes off, and there's all this, Justin Wong's winning Evo and all this stuff, and the community really develops around it. In 2000, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 comes out and is this huge boom for the fighting game community. And indeed, it becomes more a culture than just something people do. People have a relationship with the characters, with what it means to go out and play with one another in casuals, what it means to attend tournaments, what it means to share tech, how this game is affecting them, and how it affects them on an individual level as well as a communal level. There is a culture that's developing around this. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 comes out, and I think it was 2011. And famously, just like 7 or 8 months after it comes out, it gets an update, and then it is frozen in time, never to be updated again. Why? Because Marvel takes off. Iron Man 1, the film comes out, the MCU kicks off, and it becomes one of the biggest, most recognizable names in entertainment across the world. But handful of their characters are still over in Fox. That causes a lot of red tape, and it seems as though Capcom can't make any more Marvel vs. Capcom games. Well, they do it anyway, and in 2017, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite comes out. They just skip over the characters that are in question. So Wolverine, the X-Men, Magneto, Storm. I mean, I know those are all X-Men characters, but and they're just like, well, and I hate to bring it up. I love you, Peter. I love you, Combo Fiend, but that mention about functions, that's actually really crucial here, because people pushed back on this. It was not the game, it was not the franchise that they had fallen in love with, and it was not okay. It wasn't Capcom's prerogative in a certain way to get rid of these characters and call something Marvel vs. Capcom, because the community had, even at this point, taken it and it made it their own, and that wasn't Marvel vs. Capcom, which is interesting, to the point where they reject it, the game ultimately fails, and maybe the franchise has fallen away completely. But I should go back. Combo Fiend, at one point, a representative from Capcom, said players aren't looking to see these exact characters, talking about Magneto. They want other characters that function in the same way, that play in the same style, and as long as they can have functions of those characters that they've fallen in love with, they'll be okay. And the response to that was, no, we want Magneto. We want Storm, we want Wolverine, and it is not Marvel vs. Capcom unless it is those characters. It is not the movements they make, it is not their hitboxes, it is that character, those characters, that identity that we are after. That shows you that this is more than a game. This is a culture, and that was a non-negotiable about this.
Yeah, and just to highlight a little bit more of the scenario there, that directive was handed out by the suits at Capcom. And Peter and Mike Evans, I believe Mike is still there, were the unfortunate people who had to fall on that sword with being the messengers. So the community, of course, being very kind and thoughtful about all this stuff, just shot both messengers as much as humanly possible. Their corpses were on the ground. They started beating them.
OTG,
pretty much,
keep going.
Yeah. That was not a fun experience for those guys. Sorry, Peter. Sorry, Mike.
No. But we learned a lot from it, right? So, okay, and then what was it, 4, 5, 6 months ago, Maximilian kicks off the free MVC2. Of course, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is no longer available to purchase digitally or physically, and that's not okay with the Marvel vs. Capcom crowd. So they are pushing to get that re-release, let their voices be heard. And then in more modern times, and the bulk of what's going on right now and the focus that I want to look at is an evolution of Marvel vs. Capcom 3. People have been able to mod for a long time, but in the fighting game community, that usually means that they can change the physical appearance of characters. And so while it's still like, say you're changing Ryu, it's still very much just the Ryu character, but maybe you make him look like, Albert Wesker or whatever. And so it looks like another character. Oh, and maybe they're sort of similar, but they're not really going to function any differently. That's been around for a long time. But the Marvel vs. Capcom community has gone, well, Infinite didn't work. This franchise feels like it's frozen, maybe dead. Maybe something else will come out in the future now that Disney owns everything. It's like maybe that red tape is gone, but we're not going to hold our breath for it. And we still want to play these games that we like, not Infinite. What are we going to do? We will take the art and we will continue to evolve it. And through a community effort of a lot of really brilliant minds that are good with this kind of tech and that can now share their findings and enhance each other's forward progress, they have changed it from just being able to mod and palette swap. They're able to import different characters from different games into Marvel 3, design these characters to fit the Marvel mold a good bit, and now we are seeing the likes of Thanos and Rashid and Jury and Urian and Cyclops and all the characters that anyone would want. Implemented into Marvel vs. Capcom 3, shared with the community, and the game is truly on its way to becoming the next version of MVC3, completely developed by the community. The art has been taken from Capcom in a certain sense and taken forward. Dakota has been on our team here. Dark Horse has been writing a lot about these mods and this kind of narrative that's been playing out. And in one of his articles, he said, at this rate, in a year or two, we could essentially be playing a brand new Marvel vs. Capcom game that was built from the ground up by fans. Maybe not brand new. You could get lost in the weeds there. But the significance, the takeaway is that yes, the fans are taking this farther because it means so much to them that Capcom almost can't just say we're stopping it. It's become bigger than them. Now, you might see a cease and desist or two come out, and maybe there will be some weeds there
Might come
for
from
people
Disney.
to get.
Disney's
Yeah,
kind of notorious, actually. I've watched numerous things, and it's like Mickey Mouse gives someone a cease and desist, and it's like 5 billion pages long, and other stuff. And it's like that might be coming here. It's kind of always a dance that modders do, in this scene. But yeah.
yeah. Oh, here you go.
Yeah, that's not bad, not a bad impression. So you need a little bit more insanity lurking behind that very friendly voice, by the way,
Yeah,
to properly represent Disney's
I got to play a
lawyers.
little more Marvels. What I got to do to get into that thing. So I see this and I go, this is beautiful in a way. Again, it's a culture that the fans have reclaimed, and it's literally, you can see it in action, the art no longer belonging to the original artist in a very significant way. And as much as I'd like to say that's crazy and it's never been done before, it's like this has been done before in recent times with another fighting game, Super Smash Bros. Right? And that of course happened with the evolution into Brawl. It was a decent game, but it had some very big issues with it, and so the community said, well, it's close, but it's not exactly what we want. We'll just take it and change it into what we want. And they did Project M, where they applied a lot of, they got rid of tripping and they tuned some things around to make it closer to Melee, closer to what they wanted. And then even more recently, they've granted online play to Melee via the Slippy mod. And now people can play Super Smash Bros. Melee in a 2 decades plus old game online. And
Yeah.
it's
Rollback code.
amazing.
Yeah,
With
rollback
netcode.
with rollback code, it's like, yep, they got it in there. It's when you're modding old games, the rollback code's a little easier to do because the performance decreases from saving game states. It's not as much because you're talking about games that are 10, 20, however many years old. The hardware that you're running it on is so much more powerful than a GameCube was, right? It's light years ahead of it. So rollback code is not too hard to do with some of these older games.
Absolutely. So where will this go? I don't know. It could just end up in a political, crash and burn if Disney decides they want to put the kibosh on it. But for as long as it goes, and for as many new characters, new mechanics, new ways of playing Marvel pop up, I think that this is something we should really appreciate. And maybe it, best case scenario, the passion resonates so far up the chain that the powers that be see this as a financially worthwhile venture and do stuff by the book.
I got to cut you off there and just to say that's not an if, that's a definite thing. When executives at these companies are seeing dollar signs, they're going to put some effort into trying to make this go. Now it may not go anywhere, but I do remember, like, it was like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was like the number one Xbox Live selling game or whatever when they re-released it, and it was such a prominent product that it did help ignite some stuff between Capcom and Marvel, and to get stuff going. So these studios, they do very much care when there's a lot of movement happening with these franchises that are dormant or whatever. They very much will use that stuff as leverage to kind of, get some stuff going. It's not a definite, but it is something that is consistently used at these companies to ignite stuff, to get it started.
Mm. Well, regardless of what happens, even if Marvel vs. Capcom never comes back, it will never be said with any kind of accuracy that that wasn't because the Marvel vs. Capcom culture community was not trying. And that did
It's
not
wonderful to
show
see.
passion
Yeah.
and love for their game. And it's not to say that other communities don't obviously have this kind of a thing, but MVC, you guys, I part of the fighting game community, but also I'm more of a Street Fighter kind of guy. But I look across the aisle to the MVC crowd and I go, you guys are the real deal. You guys are hype. You guys are passion. You guys are more than a community. You have become a culture, and that's awesome.